No, we have 5 kids and 1 on the way. We are 29. Both of us are 20. No, I'm still
You're still
29.
29.
Still 29. We have a lot of kids, so they came to us and said, "Hey, could you guys talk about what it's like to be exhausted?" So we're here to do that. Um, we have a 7-year-old. That's Cyrus with the crooked head smile. We have a bunch of other kids. I can't do it all. And then we've got a baby girl on the way, our second baby girl. Don't make me try, even with the names up there. Um, we we have been married now for 8 years. We met when we were 15. We fell in love. I mean, like really fell in love. And if you don't believe in love at first sight, that's okay. It wasn't like first sight, but it was like
It's like late spring.
it was like by the second semester of school that year. We were both actually. She pretended she wasn't just madly in love, but we were both actually really interested in involving God in our relationship. So we had conversations with each other and with God all the way through, even dating and before we were dating. And when her dad said I couldn't date her and pulled out a shotgun and tried to scare me and um, all his other guns. But even then, we were saying, look, we don't want to get into this relationship. I don't want to get into a relationship with somebody who I'm not planning to hear God with and pursue. And so we spent a lot of time just talking to God and each other and finding, was this his calling for us? And we got in a rhythm of doing that. We did it with marriage. We did it with how we were going to approach parenthood. And now we are the proud parents of all these kids because we said to each other, hey, when we feel God say yes, we'll go forward. Maybe, I don't know. So anyway, the best times in our life so far and the busiest have been when we say yes to God, when we don't just do things, we stop and we pause and we ask God, what do you want us to do? And when he says go, we go. And when he doesn't say go, sometimes I go. And then Liz says, that was, we should have waited on God for that one. So some of the worst times in our life have been times where I'm like, let's go. We can do this. We can shoulder this. We can handle this. And God hadn't put his grace and his blessing on it. So our story, married and bam, pregnant. We were pregnant probably within like 2 weeks of getting married. We had our first boy. Then we were running the youth group at our church, the young adult group. I was leading a music team, teaching catechism. What else? Parish council, I think, or maybe not yet.
Yep.
I don't know, but we were doing everything.
Yeah.
And then we bought a 100-year-old house, and I was fixing that up. We were both working full-time jobs. And we couldn't have made it through that season if it wasn't God putting grace on that season. So we've had all these other kids, and that's.
We want to tell them why we have kids.
This is our guiding quote. This is Michael Scott saying, yeah. I didn't have many friends in high school, so we figured if we made a bunch of friends and they couldn't say no to us, then we'd be cool. Yeah. So we wanted to chat with you guys. That's all, I think. And we wanted to talk to you about how faith, hope, and love have been, they sound like cliches. I swear they do. Everybody says faith, hope, and love, and they get it like tattooed in Chinese on their shoulder. But that's been like the thing that has carried us, the thing that's pulled us forward, the things, I guess. So pick it up, Liz.
Well, one of the things, like Avery was saying, that we had talked about and prayed about before we got married, ministry obviously was a big one. I actually was 15, and I remember clearly being in Avery's living room, helping his mom like clean something because he was, I don't know where you were at the time. I was waiting for you to come back, and I was like helping her clean the living room. And I just knew that I had heard God say he's going to lead youth ministry. And we were 15, so we were in the youth ministry at that time. It wasn't like he was leading
We
anything.
were victims, not like leaders.
Yeah. And I just said, okay. I was like, yeah, cool. I'm on board with that. And kind of that's like been the repetitive theme in our life, has been God saying something to us. And sometimes it's easy to say yes to it. Sometimes, it's just that blind obedience where you have no idea what it's actually going to cost when you say yes. And you find out later. But sometimes it is that wrestling match of like, all right, God's saying this and I know you're good, but I don't really want to trust you on this. And, I think that's just the constant conversation with God is kind of the theme in our relationship and has been like the balancing tool for us throughout everything. But when, so I knew we were going into ministry, and we both knew pretty quickly we were going to get married. There was just like a lot of confirmation about that, which was funny because we both kind of had our own plan, which was, obviously it's illogical to start dating. When you want to date towards marriage, you're like, why would I start dating at 15? That's so ridiculous. But yet that's for whatever reason, kind of the way that God brought us together. And another thing like that we had prayed about was being open to life, which I don't know how many people have heard that term before. Has anybody? Yes?
You're a genius.
So open to life, what that really means is that, at least to us, is like we aren't going to use, number one, like the most obvious definition is we're not going to use contraceptives. We're not going to necessarily be setting out to prevent fertility from taking place. And so we waited till we got married, and again, bam, pregnant. And that was funny because I think in our naive minds, we were like, oh, we've waited for 5 or 6 years. God's going to bless us with a break, and then we're going to have kids. But no, we were immediately pregnant. And so for us, the term open to life, again, for us, we're not using contraceptives. We were open to the idea of getting pregnant. But once you are, you have this whole thing that's like, okay, but what does that really look like? What does that really mean? You do have to wrestle that through with God. So we can say something in faith, like, I will be open to life, because you believe God has said that to you. But that's kind of not the same as once you get into it. Now you have to walk out that faith and say, okay, well, I'm open to life, and now I'm pregnant. So now we're pregnant, and we're going to have to wrestle out like our feelings on that and our emotions about that. So with Cyrus's pregnancy, it was tough. It was a lot of like kind of just dealing with the emotional impact of that, because when you're 21 and you're pregnant right away once you got married, that was a heavy duty impact because nobody around us was married or nobody around us was pregnant at the time. So it was a lot, but it was really, really good, because what it taught us is you have the faith to say yes, but then you have to listen and have that willingness to continue that dialogue and conversation with God, so that you can also have the hope in the middle of the faith season. When you're walking out the thing you said you had faith for, God's going to bring hope into that season. So for us, continuing that, I guess, we had Cyrus. He was a baby with reflux, which, if you've ever had acid reflux, you're like, oh, that's kind of uncomfortable. Or maybe it's really bad and it hurts. But for a baby, what it means is they will scream. We have literally, like, on record, Cyrus screamed, not cried like a baby cries, screamed for 7 hours. And we were sleeping maybe 3 hours total in a 24-hour span for like 3 or 4 months. And really, he didn't sleep the night till well after 6 months old. So we went through a really, really big season of going, we had faith to say we were open to life, and we believe what God's saying. There's tons of scriptures that, Psalm 127 is like one of the scriptures we put in here that says, I don't know where it is, actually, my paper's gone. But it's basically like, thank you. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward. So, like, can you imagine, like, you have the faith to say, oh, God said this in his word, I believe it. And then you're holding someone who has not stopped screaming for 7 hours, and you're going, how is this a reward? Like, this is not enjoyable at all, not even remotely. There's not even that layer of baby cuteness that, like, is able to wear through your human impatience. With that, you're just like, it's terrible. So we had to really rely on continuing that conversation with God to say, okay, we believed this in faith, but now we're wrestling it out and looking for God's hope in that situation. And the cool part is, again, that dialogue with God spoke to us a lot about, and a lot of people actually, again, in the charismatic community would talk to us about how anointed his life was and the timing of his life was, and how God has a plan that's very much on purpose for him. And that's been confirmed over and over and over again. And just, we do really believe that God opens and closes the womb. So it's like that's a really hard thing to walk out, because when you're saying I'm open to life, that means if we never had Cyrus or we never got to have another baby, we had to be open-handed with that. And if we ended up having a lot of kids, we had to be open-handed with that. So
The big thing there, I mean, with anything, whether you're getting into ministry or getting into marriage or getting into parenting, whatever it is, you can say, I mean, we live in linear time, I think. But you can say, yes, yes, God. And then you take a step forward. I mean, Peter did it on the waves. You go, yes, God. And then the waves get a little scary and you're now standing on the ocean and you go, oh, I don't know. And your faith wants to crack. But the trick to it is you just take one step. That's all he ever asks, is like one more step, one step forward. So I was, when we got pregnant with Cyrus, I had expectations on what my life would look like. I thought, we'll get married. We've been patiently working towards marriage. We were not having sex, which, it sounds crazy to a lot of people, but it's like when you're dating from like age 16 to like 21, that's a long time. It's a long time. And so I was like, well, God, we've been really faithful. So I think I'll get all the desires of my heart. And I was like, we're gonna travel. We're gonna see Europe. It's gonna be great. And she was. We landed in Europe
a month after we got
married. And she had a pregnancy test for me. I was mad at God.
We found out the day
I was
we
mad
landed.
at God. She couldn't drink in the wine in Italy. She couldn't smell the cheese on the food. Dude, it was rough. It was like boot camp. So we're not out here telling you, oh, dude, if you trust God, things are going to be so easy. Things are going to be so great. Sometimes things are really hard. And sometimes when you're in ministry and you're also in ministry to your family, your spouse and your kids, it is a grind. It is just that one step forward. But I promise you this. If you'll take that next step out in the waves, Jesus will meet you there on the water. He will not let you go down. He has provided for us. I mean, I don't know what he hasn't provided, but he's provided a truck in one season for me, a car in another season, a computer that I needed for work, paved a driveway for us. We have the best mortgage rate, the best, and we would not have picked the timing. And it was like God's timing. We moved in God's timing. And they're like, okay, we're going to trust him on this. And everybody helped us move. Our furniture was provided by God largely. Our roof was replaced by God, like just through the hands of other people. Mm-hmm. Thousands of dollars in home repairs. Times where we were going, okay, we'll trust him. And people will like look at us and be like, kids are expensive. And it's like, yeah, but not as expensive as not trusting God. Like mm-hmm. when you trust him, results may vary, but when you trust him, he will just bless you. He will bless the trust. You can do the wrong thing in faith, and I can testify he will still bless you for having done something in faith. Mm-hmm. So even through uncertainty, faith is the thing that makes the yes possible. It makes the hard times just a little bit more bearable. It gives us the courage to say yes, but then you've got to have hope. Mm-hmm. Pick it up, babe.
All right. Yeah. Which part of hope were you wanting me to talk about?
The hopey part.
The hopey part of hope.
Yeah.
I think. Let me see. Sorry, I actually lost my page.
Yeah, try this one.
Okay. So when we were pregnant with our fourth, I guess I'll just kind of pick up there. We were not expecting to. Oh, did I drop it?
No, you got it.
We were not expecting to be pregnant with our fourth, which may sound silly when I start this whole thing by saying we were open to life. But what is normal, just and expected, is that usually if you are like nursing a baby, you're not like biologically, you're not likely to get pregnant. So you usually get at least a year between babies before you have another pregnancy. And what we found is that my body did not respond that way. And so because of that, we were getting pregnant with Cyrus. We were pregnant right away, but then it was like 9 months later after he was born, which again, his birth and everything was a very traumatic event. But one of the beautiful parts about our story is how like, it's not to discount that childhood trauma or birth trauma or things that happen to people aren't real. Like you may witness something really bad in your life, but it's that when we give it to God, he can really, really, really redeem that. And that's just obviously God. He takes broken things and redeems them. So it's not at all discounting difficult, extremely trying situations and the effects they have on us, difficult things we saw in our own childhood or upbringing, but it is that he is a redemptive God and he will work that out. So we were pregnant at 9 months, postpartum from Cyrus with Jack. After that, we were pregnant at 6 months postpartum from our second son with our third son, Leo. And after him, we were like, okay, well, we need to figure something out. This is just too much. I mean, we still trust God. We're like, we believe you, God. We know you've got this. But, you know, if we have any say in this matter, we'd like to put in a request, which is like, let's slow down a little bit. We'd like that. So we started using what's called natural family planning, which is basically, you know, you just basically are tracking fertility cycles and trying to like space the pregnancy apart by just like timing that sort of thing. So we started looking into that. And yet, even though we were technically doing it perfectly, and it was physically 99.9% impossible for us to get pregnant, we were with our fourth child. And that was at 3 months postpartum. I think the statistics on that are insane. We had an argument in the doctor's office because the doctor was yelling at us, you can't be pregnant. That's not possible. And we were going, I don't know what to tell you. We all can see the baby is in there. So anyway, so we were pregnant with our fourth. We were both feeling weary, I would say. It was definitely one of those times where we were still going, okay, God, you know, you heard our request, but you answered with an answer we didn't expect. We were hoping once again for a particular result in that particular season. And God said, nope, let's get started. And the interesting thing was that season mirrored the previous pregnancy because of the timing. It was exactly the same seasons that I had been pregnant with Leo. And like I was saying, there are things that can be traumatic or be hard or difficult about, you know, even just trusting God. You can go through, it doesn't mean you won't go through a traumatic season. And we went through a very traumatic season in 2020 with the pregnancy with my son, Leo, our third. And every single month was matched up. I mean, Lila was born 2 weeks after Leo's first birthday. So every single part of that year was lined up with the year before. We were pregnant at the exact same time, the entire time. And we were given a complete, like it was a mirror pregnancy, but a complete opposite result. So instead of having a doctor, the last doctor who was extremely aggressive, unsupportive, disrespectful, like the hospital had rats. There was so many bad things that happened during that entire year. Our child was in the NICU. It was, the doctor was, there's so many things we can go into detail. COVID
that was our fault.
Right? And so with 2021, that pregnancy with our daughter was just this beautiful story of God showing us like the redemptive qualities that he had for us as we walked in faith. So even though he said no to our requests for spacing, he was showing us that he could heal all the things we were afraid of that had happened before. And after I had Lila, we both just were like 10 times more likely to say yes to any other child. Not because it looked logical, but because we had prayed so much throughout that entire year. We had the best year of our lives. We just literally, we were probably more in love than we were in high school. We were just constantly in unity on everything. And our household was just really, really flourishing. And it was just because God's, again, healing and grace was poured into that season. And he was saying, watch what I can do with your faith and look at the hope I have. We didn't have the hope the entire year. We had the hope every time we reached out in prayer and said, God, this is so scary. What if, so all of our babies also are cesareans. So what that means is it's a surgical delivery, which increases the risks with each child you have. So because of that delivery, the scientific community would recommend, don't keep going. You should not continue to have multiple cesareans because of the damage that it could inflict on your body, or it could have risk for the baby. The most trying scenario that they are mostly afraid of is that there is theoretically, not necessarily true to happen, but it can literally rip open the scar tissue there. So the idea of a catastrophic rupture is obviously a horrific possibility. And so there was many times we were on our knees going, God, these pregnancies don't make sense. And the response we got from him was just a peace like we've never known. I mean, that birth was probably the closest we've ever felt
Oh yeah, it was
God's
divine.
presence. It was just absolutely his presence the entire time. It was beautiful. We were worshiping in the delivery room. It was phenomenal. So he brings hope in those seasons where we're looking at it and going, I have no hands on the wheel. I'm not in control of this at all. He's there and he's present and he's got it. He's got it, and he can give you the hope that he has. Just like Bishop Chuck was saying, that he has the faith for this. He really gives you the hope for the season that you need too. So if you're ever dealing with a ton of discouragement, or you think I'll never conquer, whatever the situation is in your life, just ask God. And when you have that conversation, he's got all the hope for it. So
we're constantly in our life balancing ministry in the church and ministry at home. My parents were in full-time ministry. My dad was a car salesman / priest when he got ordained into the priesthood. And then he quit his sales job. He was, I think, sales manager at a big dealership. And he was really good at that, I guess, but he quit that. So I got to watch my parents strive and struggle with bills and with 6 kids of their own, and with running a church, starting a church, planting it with, 5 people, and no budget. And so messiness, like a little chaos, a little uncertainty was natural to me, but walking into it with my family, for you guys in the room, you have this weight of responsibility in our culture, but also in churches and in your career. You got a lot to carry. And you may say, well, your spouse could make 6 figures, and you go, well, she covers the bills or whatever, but it's still, you talk to other guys, and everybody has an expectation on you as a man. So balancing ministry and responsibility to help support the family and being a good dad and a good husband, it's messy sometimes. And what I have found is that whether it's really hard or just a little hard, whether you're a youth pastor, a music leader, the church repair guy, I don't care what it is, you got to balance God's call and his grace with your sense of responsibility, because you can quickly outrun the grace and the call on your life by saying, oh, I have to go this far, I have to do this much, I have to perform and jump high enough and just act a little bigger and stronger. As leader of our family, it's always been in my nature to go further, do more, give more time. And in the seasons where I was able to say, okay, what did God last call me to? And identify that, and then set down things that weren't that and focus back on that. Our family finds grace. Our family finds peace. Even when we've got impossibly close children, in birth, and my car's breaking down and I can't afford another one at the time. And whatever it was, there were horrible hospital, COVID, anxiety, everything else. When we met God in that and we said, we can't do it, he always gave us the grace. And what we found is he doesn't just give us hope, he gives others hope through us. Because when we as individuals, as men and women, say, I can't do it, I need God, and admit this is a mess. Even with God, it can look messy. Come to my house, I'll prove it. It's a mess sometimes. Because we have 5 little kids and they drew a rainbow on our white couch last week. And so it can look messy, but it becomes the gospel for your family and the gospel for others to say, when you trust God, he'll carry you. And it may be messy. It's okay to show up to church with, one kid still crying because they left their toy in the car and you're 20 minutes late and, you're disheveled. It's like when you're pursuing God into the unknown, you don't just provide hope for your family, you provide a testimony of hope for others, because he will meet you if you'll give him the space to do it. So with faith, we say yes, and we take the next step, but hope steadies our heart. And love is what has always grounded us and equipped us for the things that we can't handle. So you pick it up there.
Yeah. So love is definitely something that we said this. It's
Our
the
quote.
it's the foundation and the foundational measurement. And kind of, I mean, it may seem cliche, but you literally can use scripture as a tool. So using First Corinthians 13, obviously everybody knows that's the love scripture. It's you used it almost every wedding, I think, and it's really powerful as a tool, though, to measure how well are you serving Christ and walking out His call on your life to be Christ in your ministry, and how well are you serving Christ in your household, as a parent, as a spouse, and even just in your community, like just to people around you. How well are you serving? Read through the scriptures about love, and you'll know, am I being Christ? Because Christ is love. And so it's like when we're wondering, oh, how many people came to youth group last time? Like, that's a great measurement tool. How happy are my kids with me? How obedient are my kids? Like, that can look like, oh, that's a measurement tool. Actually, it usually comes down to it. We found we've used those tools. They didn't work out for us.
Bad KPIs.
Yeah, it comes back to like, did we love well? I love lately Avery, and I think he got it from Jimmy. This like tool that Avery's been using recently is with work. He's just recently this year, he's on his own with his business. And so he's dealing with the added pressures this year of now being like solely responsible for all the income for all of our family. And so one of the things that he keeps saying that I think he got from Jimmy was every day the measurement isn't a metric of how much work did he get done. It's was he faithful in his work. So it burns through everything. When you have a tool like that, it cuts past, the measurables that we think mean we did good enough. I remember in nursery, I led the nursery as a nursery director for a few years. And I often felt like, oh, I got to just see how many kids were coming in. I got to, review the parents, see how they liked the experience with the nursery. I got to make sure it's clean. Got to do all of these things. And I've started realizing like, no, it really is how loved and valued are the volunteers in nursery? How well am I taking care of them? And am I loving my family? So it actually came down to us. One of the things I wanted to touch on was you said that God gives grace for each season, which obviously that list of things that he was reading out is evident of God's grace in our lives for those seasons where we need it a lot. And we always need a lot. But the cool thing that we've learned too is that God's grace moves with his calling. So if he calls you into a season where, it's all out of your hands, he provides for that. The things that are missing, the pieces that are missing, he puts in there. He puts in the pieces that are missing. But then when you're not supposed to be in that season anymore, he will like pry stuff out of your hands. The grace moves. It is not there anymore. And so that's been a really interesting thing for us to experience. It doesn't mean you're not called to something if it's hard. Sometimes we are called to just, again, have that conversation with God and say, God, am I still supposed to be here? This is really hard. And sometimes the answer is yes, to continue on through and persevere, because perseverance is definitely a very real aspect of ministry and family living. But there are times where he says, no, my grace is moved. So now you have to follow God's peace and follow that grace. So one of the interesting things, kind of going back to the family life side of it, was we said we're open to life, right? So we had all these kids back to back. So with Lila, I finally went, our fourth child, I get it, God. You just want us to have all the babies all the time. And then we started again practicing natural planning, but I kind of thought this is a little silly because we're going to have a baby anyways. That's how this goes. We've been here before. But we did not. We had 2 years between Lila and our next child, Elias, our fifth. And then with this baby, I kind of went through a similar thing where I was like, oh, you know what? We're just probably going to be pregnant right away anyways. That was a fluke with Elias. We'll probably be pregnant right away. And eventually, like a year after we had him, we kind of had stopped, probably a little before the year had gone out. We stopped using natural planning. We were like open to God. Our request was out of the way. We were kind of now requesting, okay, God, we'd really love to have another child. We really would want that. And I go back and forth on it some days. There's days that everything gets a little harder. There's days you love your job, and there's days that you're kind of irritable. And so there was a day that I remember last year where we weren't pregnant. It was about a year-ish after, maybe not quite a year after Elias was born. And I thought to myself, I was like, well, whatever. If I stop tracking my cycle, we're going to be pregnant anyways. And I was just kind of thinking this, kind of not really praying it, but just kind of throwing it out there. And God responded, which I was not expecting because I was just working in my kitchen, thinking my thoughts. And he responded very quickly, "Why would I do that?" And I was like, oh, it wasn't harsh. It wasn't harsh at all, but it was a little harsh. It was
Thunder and lightning.
a little like, oh, something important is being said here. And he said, "Why would I do that?" And I said, "Well, because I'm always pregnant. I'm always pregnant. So of course you're going to give us another baby if I'm open to that again." And God said, "I do not give my darlings lightly. Every last one of them is precious to me. So don't expect that. Don't look at it and say, oh, just because I said yes to God, he's going to bless me. He's going to give these things to me." And they're not. One of the quotes that Avery said years ago was that kids are blessings. Obviously, the scriptures tell us that, but they're heavy blessings because they are. There's a lot of work that goes into raising kids, and it never stops. And so it's this beautiful, beautiful blessing that is very, very much full of hard work. But it's really easy, especially culturally, to get it confused and say, oh, they're just such burdens. They're weighing me down. They're exhausting me. They're exhausting my resources. I can't minister as well with all these babies, right? Like one of the reasons I stepped down from nursery directorship this year was because I needed to sit with my kids in my church. We didn't have a children's church, and I was leading the nursery and filling in every other week, but I was also pregnant and had all these kids. And so I ended up needing to step back because that grace was gone, and God provided in that season. And immediately a co-leader was raised up. So one of the practical things that we've kind of done too is in our ministry life, bringing things into balance, we look at it and we say, okay, if I love God and love the church, I also have to live a life that's sacrificial enough to recognize it's not about me when I'm ministering. So if I love that nursery ministry, what I ended up doing was raising up a co-leader so that when I had the grace move and I was no longer able to lead the nursery, that co-leader was already trained in how to lead that ministry, and she stepped right up into it. So it was a pretty seamless transition. And so that's just like a little bit of a practical side of that ministry leading. So
Balancing the two, balancing the ministry and the family. I always had trouble with it. I watched the way my parents ministered, and they were all in. I mean, all in. But it made it really difficult for me. I didn't have a prioritization system. So God and the church were intermingled. I couldn't tell where one started and one ended. It was, if God's people need it, then I'm serving God to provide it. If they need a youth leader, then I don't know who else is going to step up. The question can come to your mind, especially in CEC churches. They're tiny. A lot of them are really small churches, and it's like, oh yeah, sure, I can play the drums and do the reading at the lectern and clean up afterwards. It's no big deal. It's small, and somebody's got to do it. There's only a handful of people that could do this, and it's easy to get into this mentality. I even showed up for an interview with our ordinations board in our diocese, and they were like, you've heard a calling. And I said, no, but if I don't step up, we only have old priests. Eventually we're going to run out of priests. And they kicked me out of there so fast. They were like, get out of here. Unless you hear a calling, you can't, no. But that was my mentality. It was constantly like, okay, what does the Lord want based on what looks like it's needed? In the last few years, God's been really helping me clarify the decisions we've made. I think he starts with us really gracious. He treats us like toddlers and gives us just, here's the step. But later he wants, like a good dad, to teach us why he gave us that step. And so what he's been showing me is, first he gave me steps, and now he's saying, okay, here are the priorities I've put in your life, and you got to work these out. But it looks something like, as a husband or as a wife, you've got God first. Even though you've got your spouse, God comes first. Why? Because if you get that out of order, you'll end up in a place different than God designed for you. So before family comes God. And when you get that right, you can love God with all your heart, and he will not let you fail to love the others. He will not let you fail to love your church or your family the way that you're supposed to. It's really cool because it's like, oh, I love the Lord with my whole heart, and you're not taking care of your wife. Well, God will just smack you on the head and be like, come on, take care of your wife. And then you're doing better as a husband. You get that in order, and don't mix up. This is my encouragement to you. Don't mix up your church ministry or your parachurch ministry with your service to the Lord. serve the Lord with your whole heart and let him guide you, call you, and give you the grace for the calling he gives you. It might be kids, it might be no kids, it might be church ministry, it might be stepping back from church ministry. But if it's his call, it's the best thing for your family. In the last few years, I've had to let go of more ministries that I was a part of than I like. Each one felt difficult. It was like, well, if I drop this, I don't know what will happen to it. I don't know whether someone else will pick it up. And when I could, I would train somebody up. But another one is it's hard to like run a ministry and then step back and watch somebody run it like half as good. Or to be honest, in my case, like 10% as good. No, but it's hard. But God was showing me again and again in our family, first God, then family, then church and ministry. You have a career somewhere in there. I don't know where that fits. But they go in that order because if you honor God and your family, then you can build your church. There's this quote I love here. I can't read. This one. It's St. John Chrysostom. And he said, for indeed, a house is a little church. And there's so many parallels between your home, your family, and your church. They're structured so similarly when you look at it in a biblical way. What churches are really made up of. Like, what's the first thing you think of? Like the first role you think of when you think of a church? What does a church need to be a church? Anybody? It's actually a question. A priest, you go, oh, they need a priest. And yes, that's true. The husband in the home is like, and I think this is like 100% scripture, but it's modeled so many different ways. The husband in the home is like the priest to the family. He's responsible for their well-being and calling and raising up and leadership in a lot of ways. The way that God looks at that, especially if you look in the Old Testament, is like the husband is largely responsible. The father is responsible for the children and for the wife, and his decisions have trickle-down effects on them for good or for bad. I mean, the extreme examples look like, the sins of the father are carried out on the children. I think in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the bad guys, not just them, but their families were destroyed because of what they chose to do against God. I'm not out here saying God's going to destroy your family if you do it wrong. But what I am saying is the way that a family is modeled is similar to the way that a church is modeled. But a church is not the priest. A church is built of the people. The church is built of the families. So the way that you run your family as a couple is the way that the church is going to be run. So if you run your family into the ground so that the ministry looks right, your church is not going to hold together. Your family's not going to hold together until you get that right. You got to come back. So I've run seasons where I am grinding in work and ministry, and I'm like, babe, today you won't believe it. I got a compliment on how the praise has sounded better lately. I got a compliment on how I ran that meeting last week. And it's like, man, it's just such a testimony of what God's doing. And I look then and I go, but my family has to come first. My kids are in a bit of chaos. I was out 3 nights this week. You got to look at those things. And I'm not saying there won't be seasons where you got to be grinding for the ministry, discipling people. Well, you go back to that calling. What did he call you to do? Because if you're doing what he called you to do, then there's grace for it. There's grace for being 3 nights out. But if he didn't call you to do it, then you're going to learn the hard lessons that I've learned again and again. We've learned where we're like, we can do this thing. And then we fall flat on our face and we go, what happened? We outran the grace. So a big part of the love thing for us is just ministering to our family before we go and pour out into other things.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on one of the things that we wrote down was a quote. I found out recently that it's like some random actor, I think, coined this term, but I think it may be just be a popular quote. But our marriage counselor, premarital counseling, the quote that that was shared with us. Oh yeah, there it is. It was, marriage isn't 50-50, it's 100-100. So oftentimes you'll hear that said, oh, it's 50-50. Everybody should put in their hard work into your relationship. And it's like, yes, but it's actually supposed to be 100% effort because it's 100% ownership. So no one can say, oh, my marriage fell apart because of him, or my marriage fell apart because of her. It's because something broke down in this dynamic. You have to be 100% committed and 100% taking ownership of what you can. Now, that doesn't mean, if Avery's running himself dry, that's not my fault. I don't mean own something that's not your fault, but it means taking ownership of not the circumstances that you can't control, but the things that you're in control of. Your relationship with the Lord, your time spent in prayer, your efforts in acting out what God's calling you to do. So the husband is the priest of the household. And so he is called to leadership, and shepherding is one of the terms we've been using a lot in the last couple of years. But it doesn't give women a pass on the accountability there. Because one of the things that recently we've been kind of like praying about is the term shepherd and helper. And shepherd is usually the one referring to the husband, and helper is often used in the Bible to refer to a wife, that God gave a helpmate to man. But interestingly, the definition of the original word, which I can't remember whether it was Greek or a different language, but whatever that term originally is interpreted as, it's the exact same one that God uses 17 times to describe himself. So women are called to be a helper, not because they make really nice sandwiches, although that's great. If you aspire to be a great cook, that's awesome. But that doesn't mean that you can make really nice sandwiches and blame your husband for everything he gets wrong. It means that you have to actually hear God and speak the truth in love. So if you see your husband burning out and you're not saying something to him because you're just being a quiet little helper, it's like, okay, well, you're actually you're giving up the call of the Holy Spirit, which is in you, which is to speak the truth in love to your husband, because he's the helper to your husband, is the Holy Spirit, and he's not going to lie to your husband. And he's going to speak to him. So as a woman, your husband is the priest of your household. That doesn't mean that you get to say, this priest you gave me, God, he's doing a terrible job. It means your job is to speak the truth and love to that person. And one of the things that I lost my page again. Hang on 1 second. One of the things that Avery had touched on was kind of like talking about choosing ministry and family life. You have to do that with ownership as well. So it's not choosing one or the other, or choosing to do one well. It's choosing to do both and put both in the hands of a loving God. So you're not saying, oh, someone prophetically told me I'm going to lead worship, for example, or I'm going to be a priest. And then you go into that and, it gets hard, or things fall apart, or you go through a traumatic season. That's not an excuse for you to say, oh, God, this call you put on me, this is just wrecking my life. Or, that priest, he told me this, he wrecked my life. It's actually, if you say yes, now you have to take ownership of that yes with God. So you're going to have to be on your knees. You're going to have to be praying and saying, God, what does it look like for me to minister in love, or to, have a family that's full of love? And you have to keep walking that call out, because again, it's about taking ownership with God over both your ministry and your family, which helps you avoid that victimhood mentality, which is, again, you see it in the garden. This woman you gave me, the serpent did it, this ministry, it's what's wrecking my life. And it's like, no, we're definitely called to live a sacrificial life, but we're supposed to do it sacrificially, surrendered, and it does lead to a very deeply joyful life. And we have to trust God to provide and to give us strength and give the ability to hold all those pieces together, because it won't look from the outside like it's going to work. Because you do have to just trust him and continue that conversation and follow his peace, not pressure from yourself or your upbringing or your church or your own mind thinking, this is something that I should do, or this is something I shouldn't do, or I can't do it. You have to just ask God what he wants, take the step in faith, have hope that he'll provide. You'll receive hope as you pray and talk to him about it. And again, using that tool of love as the measurement, where you're looking back over those things and you're saying, okay, have I behaved lovingly? Have I been good and respectful and kind? And all of that really makes a difference in your parenting too. There's been some really good little bits there that we had, but I think we don't have time for the parenting aspect of this.
Let's just blow past it. We got another 30 minutes for you guys. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
No.
But a question we wanted to leave you guys with is, how is God calling you to love your family and your church community well in this season? This question for me is a frequent one. Got to run it over in my mind, because I can be like, I'm killing it with the family. My family is so healthy. But my ministry needs a little bit more work, and it's balance. It's constant balance, or my ministries or our ministries.
Yeah.
They flex dynamically with the seasons. So ask these questions. Ask yourself, what does God want? Ask God, honestly. Just don't ask yourself. Just skip straight to asking God. You'll always have a worse answer than him. And then say yes to a surrendered and sacrificial and deeply joyful life. Trust him in giving you a calling, and then trust his ability to hold it together once he does. He's the promiser, and he's good. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
We'll just leave this here.